And it takes a little while. Oh, there we go. All right, so welcome back again, guys. Let's continue where we left off. So we're looking at the the framework that the text is going to be positing for us is called the relational leadership model, which will soon be referred to as the RLM model. And you can see that the framework requires a lot of it pulls a lot from psychology and from education, and that is going to be heavily dependent on a lot of the elements that we talk about next. So the framework requires that we do a lot of self-analysis, learning about self, which is the assignment that you have on your self-analysis. Self-awareness in the context of others, that has to do with the chapter that is going to be presented on understanding others, because the way we perceive ourselves is not necessarily going to be the same way that other people perceive us. So that's something that there's a kind of dichotomy that deals with that there. But all of that is part of the parcel of understanding about yourself. Understanding your own personal values, beliefs, and commitments. So here we're talking about understanding what are the things you hold most dear to you and what governs your behavior. So that has a lot to do with your ethical framework that you're dealing with. So in order for leadership development in this program, we're going to be dependent upon self-awareness, effective listening, collaboration, compromise, and because it's a skill that we have to develop, it's going to require a fair amount of practice. Now, we talked a lot about self-awareness understanding. What do you understand is the meaning of effective listening? What is effective listening? Anybody?
Effective listening is actually hearing and understanding what the person's saying versus it kind of just going in and out of each ear.
Mm-hmm. And what is one of the main things you think you're required to do to be able to listen effectively to somebody else's point of view?
Block out distractions and noise.
Right? And what would you consider noise?
Anything around you that can kind of um, hinder your hearing. So if I'm tuning out and I'm listening to the traffic outside, instead of listening to what the person's saying, or if I'm on my phone, letting that distract me.
So that what you're talking about there is focus. Focus on the person that you're listening to.
Mm-hmm.
There's one thing that I'm trying to get.
Can I add to this?
Yes, please.
Okay, I would think that this is listening probably without judgment.
There we go. That is the most critical part of effective listening, is to remove our own filters of judgment on the on the topic and the individual that you're speaking to or listening to. That is going to be probably the most difficult element, because we generally, as humans, we tend to listen through the lens of our own personal experience and belief structures, and dismantling that and putting that on pause is what is required for effective listening, which is why that requires a lot of practice, because it's not going to happen. And if we can listen effectively, it means that we could collaborate better. It means we can get together and understand things better. Now, compromise is another element that comes from that. But a lot of people view compromise as a weakness. Why is that? And why do you think people sometimes view compromise as not necessarily the best thing? Anybody?
I think that compromise can deal a lot with giving in. So maybe some people will see it as a weakness because you're not really standing on your point, like firm on just your point or point of view.
Mm-hmm. And therefore, the idea that if you're compromising, you're viewed as being weak is a fallacy, because it means that you're not truly collaborative. if you're not compromising. And why is that? Because we are taught to believe that if you truly believe something, then everybody else must, you must get people, if you're strong enough, to get them to go your way, right? But who made you God? Who made you the only person that has the ability to develop the only correct view of a situation as it presents itself? So that is the danger that goes into compromise, because we go into situations perceiving or believing that we know the best, right? Because okay, I'm doing this the longest and that kind of stuff, and I know what'll happen and yada yada yada. But at the end of the day, compromise is about bringing the best from each party to act on a particular situation, which means to get the best idea means more using more than one person's point of view, because the perception of different people will help to look at something in a more a broader sense than just the one limited view that any one individual brings to bear on a circumstance. Regardless of how you feel about it, remember it's always going to be just your point of view. So in other words, what we're saying there is you have to effectively listen to be able to effectively compromise, because you have to understand why somebody is believing or seeing something different to you, and that's going to be a very important part of developing your leadership skills. Now, foundation principles that this model is developed upon, it first and foremost is that leadership is something that is important to everybody. It's not, I know when I was growing up, I always felt that politics was not something that was for me. I used to stay away from it, especially because I saw how much division and quarreling it developed. Still, to a great extent, politics makes me feel very uncomfortable because of the amount of value judgment that goes on with it. But what we can't escape is that what happens when leaders make decisions is that it impacts upon us all, and therefore it matters that the leadership that exists around us, whether it's our own leadership decisions or other people making this leadership decisions, we have to realize that what happens with leadership concerns us all. We also have to appreciate the fact that leadership is viewed and valued differently by different people. Um, some people see it as very, very important and critical. Other people see it as marginal. And it really depends upon how close some individuals may be to the circumstances and situations, then um, and how far they are from centers of decision making. So that's actually something that I've noticed a lot in politics, where if you go to very rural areas of Trinidad and Tobago, they don't really pay attention to a lot of what is happening in Port of Spain, simply because they're so far from the center of power and decision making that the impact of decisions are very not felt very easily or quickly in that rural part of the world. In fact, it feels almost as if there's no change taking place around you, um, because the decisions that they're making in those centers of power very seldomly ever come to visit upon the place that you live and work. Um, Anybody here live in like deep south or in Tobago areas, that kind of stuff? Anybody in this class? I think we spoke to some people. Or like in
So what is considered deep south?
well, it depends upon how far in like into Rio Claro and Tableland and Erin and those areas. No, nobody? Or you have family down on that end?
Yes, sir. I love Erin.
Right. So decision making by leadership in Port of Spain tends to have very limited impact upon everyday life in Erin, not so? Is there any element, let me ask that question of the person from Erin, any aspect of the current or the last budget is going to impact upon you directly?
Um, yeah, economically.
Yeah, but which one?
I don't understand. How is impacting economically?
Yeah.
Like, well, I work San Fernando, so I'll have to put more gas. I mean,
Right.
sorry, the same amount of gas, but the
Capital change.
yeah,
Right. Yes, that is true. But are there other decisions that were made that would impact upon you? Because I know that is going to be the one that's going to be most important to you, because that affects your day-to-day living.
yeah,
And that's what I mean. If there was no change to the situation with the gasoline subsidies,
mm-hmm.
then anything else that was said in that budget may or may not have been
Affected.
viewed as being effective to you. And
Yeah.
that has. When's the last time roads down in your area was paved?
Sorry.
When's the last time roads in your area were repaved?
Um,
Exactly. You understand? So it appears
yeah.
when you go home. I mean, you said you live in San Fernando, right? I mean, you work
No,
in
I
San
work San Fernando.
Right. But when you leave San Fernando and you go back home to Erin, it feels as if you're going back in time. No?
Going
It
back in time?
yeah, things not changing. It just seems to be
No.
staying the same. And the
Yeah.
only change that would occur would be those small changes that you're able to bring to bear in your immediate environment that you live in.
Yeah.
Correct? But are you home right now in Erin?
No, sir.
All right. Can you attend classes from Erin? Okay, online?
Yeah.
Isn't that a change?
Attending class from
Home from
yeah.
Erin. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is. Yeah. Other than that, you would have to be staying in San Fernando to attend classes in the South Campus.
Yeah.
Right. So again, remember, we need to understand why people view things differently to others. So that's one of the elements, understanding it in the context of the individual life. To be able to do that, we have to, remove our own judgment based upon our own experiences and values and look at it from the position that the other person is trying to come to. All right. So those are some of the foundation concepts. All right. So it's flexible, so it doesn't stay stagnant. There are different settings called for different types, meaning that there are different leadership models that have to be utilized in different situations. And the most important element of foundation of this particular model is that it is a model that is predetermined that you can learn these skills and you can develop them through practice. And that's a critical element that we're looking at. To be able to do that, it requires commitment to these following issues. First of all, highest ethical standards, which would involve encouraging change and social responsibility. So we have a list here: critical thinking, credibility, authenticity, integrity, and ethical conduct. All right. So what is critical thinking? We talk a lot about that in our course outlines. That we're trying to make our students critical thinkers. What is a critical thinker? What do you understand from that idea? Nobody?
So,
Uh-huh.
a critical thinker is someone who analyzes and thinks deeply about a situation before making any sort of decision.
Yeah, that's primarily what you're doing is you're evaluating things from various point of views. You're gathering data and getting the facts about situations and circumstances to be able to make decisions. Yes, that's part of critical thinking. Um, I know we talk about trying to develop critical thinking in all of our classes, but there's a funny situation that comes up with that, and it's that a lot of people don't like people who think critically. Why do you think that might be the case? A lot of leaders actually don't like people who think critically. What happens when people begin to think critically?
They start questioning everything.
Say that again, sorry.
They start questioning things.
Right, and a lot of people don't like to be questioned, correct? Especially leaders, they don't like to be questioned on decisions that they make, which is one of the reasons why critical thinking is so important, because you really do you have to encourage people to engage in critical thinking processes, but it's one that a lot of people don't like others to do. But as we will see, the model that we're looking at here is going to try to encourage both people who lead and people who follow to be thinking critically. All right, so credibility, authenticity, and integrity seems to be very similar, but there are some small distinctions between them. So to be credible means to be believable, correct? To be authentic means to be truthful, and to have high levels of integrity means to be consistent in your behavior at all point in time, regardless of the circumstance under which you behave. Your behavior ought to be similar regardless of where you are, and that collectively develops or speaks to our ethical behavior. So those are some critical things that lie at the foundation of developing good leadership principles. So the basic principles require the knowing element. So we talk about knowing yourself, knowing how change occurs, knowing how and why others view things differently than you. And that's actually going to be major part of the development here. Starting with knowing yourself, understanding change and why people see things differently. And that one is going to take a little thing, because we're not really encouraged to try and understand people from that perspective in terms of, well, why is this person seeing this differently than the way I am? And that's something that you have to pay attention. And a little exercise here. Let's look at this screen here, and I want you all to focus on the pencil drawing in the corner, in the upper left-hand corner. What and now some people may have seen this exercise before, so don't sell it out if you have. For somebody who this might be the first time that you're looking at it, what do you see?
Which picture do you want on the right?
Yeah, the black and white.
Or do you want on the left? Oh.
Yeah, on the left.
So I seen a lady that
What kind
turned
of
to the side.
a young lady turning and looking over her shoulder?
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else seen that young lady looking over her shoulder?
No.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I see an old lady.
You seen an old lady?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. Anybody else seen an old lady?
I'm seeing that now.
Sir, that was tripping me out for a good second.
Yep. Okay, so who's still not seeing the old lady or the young lady?
I'm not seeing the young lady.
All right, so follow me here. I'm going to put my highlights on and watch this. If we think of this as a feather on top of a cap, and this as the hair, this hair as the nose, and this hair as the eyelashes, and this as the chin of the young lady, and her hair looking back over her shoulder, which is this, she's sort of like a mink coat on, and this mark here, it's sort of like, those little ties you have on your neck, kind of thing, like a neck, sort of like a bracelet, a choker bracelet, and all of this hair is sort of like a shawl that she's wearing over her head. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yeah. And for those of you who are not seeing the old lady, think about this hair as the lady's nose, this hair as the lady's eyes, and this hair as her chin, and this piece here as her mouth. And this is, again, a sort of shawl that she's wearing over her head. And this black piece here is her hair poking out from under the shawl. These are her two eyes looking downwards. Yes? Are you seeing that?
So finally seeing it.
Right, good. Why are we seeing what one and not the other? Well, it's an exercise in perception. What you focus on is what will cause that. Let's look at the bottom picture here. This should be fairly easy. Do you see a duck or do you see a rabbit?
A rabbit.
Both.
Well,
Both.
good. Some persons can see both, but if you
Oh, I can see the duck now.
right, good. So it's a matter of changing your perception by looking at something from a different perspective, and that's what we're talking about in terms of doing that. Now, the last picture in the corner here is a very interesting one, where both people seem to be thinking the same thing, but the problem is, has anything significantly changed between their circumstances? That's why the caption reads the bittersweet meeting of perception and reality. So the perception of one person arriving and the other person waiting and seeing the other person is that the other person is coming to save me. In both instances, the guy who's been rowing that dinghy out there for God knows how long finally sees this guy on an island and perceives himself to be saved by that guy there. And the guy who's been stranded on that island all by himself for God knows how long, seeing this guy rowing a boat here, is looking at him and seeing that, hey, this guy's coming to save me. So who's right? What's the reality of the situation there? You understand? And that's the thing about perception. Huh? Perception, there's a saying that goes, the only reality is the perception that we keep. So regardless of what things may look like, our perception creates the reality we see. Which is why sometimes when people are not psychologically sound, their perception of things can make them do things because they perceive the reality around them to be dramatically different. And thus you have a lot of behaviors that come up as a result of that. All right. So this is an interesting coincident picture here that I utilize here to show you that it depends on where you are. If you were the guy on the island or the guy on the raft, perceptions are different. Each one is perceiving the arrival of the other or the presence of the other as their solution to the problems that they currently face. The reality is that they're just probably both going to end up stranded on the island, and then the fellow with the oar is probably going to hit the fellow on his head and probably cook him and eat him, because eventually I'm not seeing much trees there to get any food, so somebody's going to have to eat somebody just now. And I know that sounds dark, but that's kind of like what I'm seeing eventually is going to happen there. All right, so moving forward. The second element is the being element. You must be ethical, principled, open, caring, and inclusive. All right, so what does now we understand ethical, and holding to ethical and principled, those two kind of work together. We kind of understand that. But what does open, caring, and inclusive mean? What does it truly mean? Anybody?
I guess open to be open to other people's opinions.
Uh-huh.
Caring about those opinions and including them in decision making.
Mm-hmm. And what does caring mean? Mm-hmm.
Well, so I guess how about three words to be tolerant to say all three tolerant to them.
Tolerant. Okay.
Yeah.
No, it's actually not. It's more than tolerant because it speaks to also being inclusive. Tolerance is such a weird word because it just means you tolerate something, but it doesn't mean that you accept the person or individual as they are and include them in your activities. And this is this is what makes being open, caring, and inclusive difficult because you have to be open to an alternative point of view. You have to care about that person and the problems that they come with and the issues that they have. And you must therefore include them in the decision making process and in the situations that you find yourself in. And that is all well and good if it's somebody that you feel, some sort of affinity towards and that you understand. But it becomes problematic if it's somebody who is diametrically opposed to you and your position and how you feel about things because they may have different ethical values and principles than you, but yet still you are expected to be open, caring, and inclusive.
Well, that's saying why I ask you use your tolerant is because a professional perspective where I work,
Uh,
we are consumed with officers joining the system with all kind of different to say deviation from the traditional lifestyle,
right?
right? And because of that, I, based on my own personal opinion or spiritual opinion, I
Mhm.
cannot let that impact my professional capacity.
Right?
So I have to be, I just say, ethical and principled and open and cared and everything. I have to listen to them,
Hmm.
even if I don't like it. I have to listen to them
Hmm.
and deal with these situation in an open, honest manner.
Right?
Right? I have to deal with it in a professional manner. But
Right?
socially, my personal capacity, I can have
No,
my own opinion.
right. That I understand, but the model that we're speaking of here is asking you to go beyond that and to be inclusive of that individual in all circumstances. So and this is what makes the model difficult because the model is requiring that we disregard our feelings about certain things that we have been traditionally led to believe and be inclusive of individuals who are diametrically different to us. And you're skirting around the issue, but what you're talking about people with alternative lifestyles, right? What we will call the LGBT um, circumstances that we face here. Um, and but this is where the challenge of leadership comes in because there is no way when you're in a leadership role that you can prevent these individuals from entering your organization, especially if you want to have a successful organization. You have to have um, some degree of variety because that variety allows you to interface with more people of different types of backgrounds and situations. So that inclusiveness goes beyond tolerating. Um, and it's good that you've started the process of beginning to be open and caring, but you need to be able to move to that inclusiveness. I'm not saying that you have to, but what I'm saying is that the model speaks to the need to become that way. And as I said before, it's easy when it's people who have similar backgrounds and opinions to you, but it becomes more challenging when you're dealing with people who are diametrically opposed to your principled positions that you may hold there. All right. This guy actually here, you all should be familiar with him. This is Richard Branson. He's Virgin Records. He's a guy who failed a lot before he became successful, and he learned something, or he said something here that he learned during the process of becoming the individual that he is today. Is having a personality of caring about people is important because you can't lead people unless you like people. Um, and that is why I thought that this quotation was important because he's not talking about loving somebody, but caring about somebody, being emotive and empathic to when things are going wrong for them makes you better as a leader, because it means that you can't fool people with it. You can't just put on airs then. Let's put it that way. You have to genuinely like people to be able to bring out the best in them, to be able to see that connection. And that's what that whole inclusiveness is going to work with. So that even though you might be working with somebody and you don't agree with them, you still have to care about them. And that then brings the connection that you're looking for. But if you are only half-heartedly dealing with it because I have to, because there's no filter or barriers to prevent individuals coming into your organization like that, then you're not going to be able to get to that higher standard. Just thought that'll come up. Now, the last element, or the third element of the developmental process, is the doing part. You must act in social responsible ways consistently and congruently as a participant in a community and on your commitments and passions. So what does this mean? This means that you act in that high ethical principle manner consistently and congruently. Now, the important thing is consistently and congruently. It means that you have to be doing the things consistently. So every time something happens, you have to behave in the same manner. All right? You have to treat with it in the same way. And congruently means that in all aspects of your life, you're going to utilize or employ the same level of ethical principles across the board. So it consistently means every day doing the correct thing all the time. And congruently means in all aspects of your life. So in your private life and in your professional life, you can't have varying standards of behavior. It has to be congruent in all aspects of your life. That makes sense? And that's because as you move from one element to the other in your community, you're going to see that your work community, your home community, your social life, and that kind of stuff, you have to be behaving consistently and congruently across the board. You can't, when you're lineman, you can't be, doing things that in other circumstances you won't do behavior-wise. So that is talking about that consistency of behavior across the board and congruency across the board, regardless of the circumstance you find yourself in. All right, which is one of the reasons why sometimes leaders find themselves in problems, because they will behave differently in different circumstances, and that kind of leads them into that slippery slope of this person is not really totally consistent in their behavior or congruent in their behavior across all things. Everybody's okay with this part so far, right? All right. So one of the elements that comes up a lot when we talk about this thing is corporate social responsibility. So many of us here work in organizations that say that they are being socially responsible. So businesses in particular, a business is really just made up of individuals, and those individuals represent the corporation soul. So the corporation has its own legal status, but it means that what happens in the organization is really going to be dependent upon what the leadership and the directorship determines that is happening in terms of all of the stakeholders that they get involved with and shareholders that they're involved with. So and you have to be consistent in your behavior across all of the different shareholders or stakeholders, and congruent in all of the behavior. So your long-term and short-term goals need to be congruent with each other. Your sincerity across all boards, especially when you're dealing with consumers or clients, and your market situation. So if you start to look at the different areas here of social responsibility, a lot of work that organizations in particular have to be focused on to be able to be consistent across the board. You can't have so in terms of how you use your resources and sustainability, these can't just be run of the mill. They are correlated to each other and have to be consistent across the two. how you treat with people in terms of your ethical values and so on. It has to be consistent across the board. Now, this is something that a lot of organizations in the past and currently have had lots of problems dealing with the public around. I mean, this whole fiasco of vaccines and the vaccinated and stuff like that is a situation that brings to bear this whole corporate responsibility, social responsibility element that comes up again. And we see this time and time again with very large organizations that say one thing and act in another way. And that is not what we're talking about here in this model. All right? That's what we're trying to get to understand what's going on. So, leadership process, first of all, the leadership process cannot be, and I've seen this a lot. I see these books that are sold and programs that are developed, 5 things that you need to do to become successful. Or you see these TikToks and short videos that try to claim to you, you do these 5 things every day and you become successful as a leader. The reality of the situation, good leadership is not a system of step by step. It's a development of thinking over time. And of course, repetition of particular good behaviors over time would be something that would help you to develop good leadership qualities. But it's not something that is simply a step-by-step process. It's a long, probably I would say a lifetime of developing a way of thinking. Because I mean, we are human, and therefore we're going to make mistakes, and therefore you have to find your way back. Developing your own personal philosophy of leadership is something that takes time, because when we first begin the process, when you start to think about it from as children growing up and as teenagers, you start to think about leadership as something that identifying your core values that help you work with others towards change. That's another thing. I mean, when's the last time any of you all sat down and really reflected on, what really are my core values in life? Do you have any quotation or words that represent how you think about things and how you identify yourself with? That's something that some lecturers would ask you to do in this program, is say develop your own motto, your own ideology, your own philosophy of life, or find a philosophy that might exist outside there in the form of a quotation or something that represents how you think you are as a person or as an individual in terms of what you do with your life. That's what this is talking about. The development of that takes time. It's not a step-by-step. It's not a follow the numbers kind of like do this, do A, then B, then C, and then you'll be good. No work. So it's a lot of work. And therefore, is why this course is just going to be introducing you to the concepts. And hopefully in the future that you will continue trying to bring to bear the behaviors that you're talking about here. All right. So let's look at this concept that we probably met a long time ago, the concept of hard work, or what the text refers to as the paradigm of hard work, solving problems. And most of us growing up would have, gotten this from our parents. In order to succeed in life, you have to work harder. But this text is saying, well, yes, that paradigm, yes, you have to put in the hard work, but they view it as being too simplistic. And instead of working harder, what they're talking about here is working smarter. But what do they mean when they say working smarter? They're really referring to things collectively smarter, reflectively smarter, and spiritually smarter. So let's examine that a little more. Collective smarter is very straightforward, because collectively all of us know more, have a better idea of what's going on, or bring to the table more vision and perception of problems and issues than just one of us. So if one person looks at a problem and tries to find a solution, they're limited by the perception and ideas and concepts and knowledge that they have. But if you bring in more and more people, or more people into that situation, you have more and more stimulus to utilize to be able to develop a solution for it. That's why they say collectively smarter. All of us are smarter than one of us, but it requires that we have to be able to compromise effectively, because you can't go in there and think your point of view alone is the best point of view. You can't go into a situation like that. And I know a lot of us tend to approach group work like this, or end up having, a feeling, I know best, I did this before, let now reach here. But maybe that is exactly what is required, a fresh look at something by somebody who's a novice, to see something that may be so blatantly obvious to other people. But because we have been involved with that circumstance or that behavior so often, we've become accustomed to doing it that way. So that's something that we have to be open to. A fresh eye looking at a problem or situation or behavior or practice can bring a different perspective that can teach us a lot more. So that's what they mean when they talk about collectively smarter, is all of us is smarter than just one of us. Let's remember that, please. The next one is reflectively smarter. Now, a lot of us don't seem to have time to do reflection, but well, I would say, I mean, I have found myself having problems with this myself in terms of doing good reflection. The idea of doing proper reflection is to sit and actually write about it. Because we get caught up with the day-to-day grind of life, and we don't really look at this whole idea of, well, okay, I need to spend some time and reflect on it, on what took place. Any of you all keep diaries where you write about your feelings and stuff like that, or things that happen? Anybody ever used to do that when they were growing up?
Yes, sir.
All right. So that's a form of reflection. Do you still keep up your diaries?
No, that was for my psychology course.
Okay, so it was in the specific context of that course, but did you not see the value of it and try to continue doing it?
Well, yeah, it helped a lot actually. It made me realize things that I didn't know was problems in my life.
Right? Because you lack the ability to reflect on it and probably see patterns of behavior over time, yes?
Yeah, it's more like you're just not present, but you're present at the same time, if that makes sense. Like you're
Yes, I
unaware of what.
understand. I understand perfectly what you're saying there. I hope other people get it as well. And this is what reflectively smarter is speaking to. Far too many times we just go through the motions of doing things over and over again and not really sitting back and thinking about, well, what did we do? What did I do? Why did we do it that way? Is this the best way? Can I, improve things? Reflection is a powerful tool, but is oftentimes not utilized because it's difficult, it's time consuming, and it requires us to be brutally honest with ourselves. And that is something that sometimes we are not willing to do, to be brutally honest to ourselves. The best way to do it, though, is to write it. And that is something that in this day and age, writing is becoming, I mean, and you don't have to write it physically. You could, type it up or record it, that kind of stuff. There's so many different options you can do for reflection. But to really get into that process, it means to develop the habit of doing regular reflection. How many of you all do reflections and make decisions for the new year? People do that sometimes. I hear people talking about making resolutions, but resolutions can't be made without serious reflection. So that's a mistake that we make. If you just, the end of the year comes and you make some resolutions, you could do this and you could do that next year and whatnot, and then did you really think about it? Did you do some reflection on the whole process and work through? Probably not. Maybe you did. Who knows? All right. So understand that reflectively smarter means to rely on past behavior to assess the validity and value of what you're doing now. All right. And then, of course, spiritually smarter. Now, here we're not talking about religion, but we're talking about what values and belief systems, understanding your value, beliefs, and principles that you have come to hold on as being the most important elements in your life. Now, there's a difference between the value systems we purport to hold as opposed to the value systems we do hold. And the best way to determine the systems we do actually hold on to and operate under is to observe ourselves when things are not going well, when you're in the worst possible situations. That is when you're going to actually reveal to yourself what your actual true principles are. So when things are rough, do you cheat? Do you you know, cut corners? What do you do when things are really bad? And that's what this is speaking to about. Not it's not saying anything negative about you, but what you have to do is to observe to yourself again. This is part of your self-discovery. What values and principles do you hold when nobody's around and when the chips are down? Or as they say here, when you're in rough waters, what do you hold to? That's what you're going to be looking for. Understanding that will determine your absolute zero base value levels. And then knowing that, you'll start to understand about what you need to do, if anything, to build on that. All right. So that's kind of like ground zero, your spiritual levels. Okay. So far, so good. Everybody's following this? Yes?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes,
good,
sir.
good. All right. So we spoke about paradigm, the paradigm of hard work. So a paradigm, or as some people said, a paradigm, is a way of looking at how things are done. So there are different paradigms that we develop and we hold and we've been working with. And this question is, what is the current leadership paradigm that you hold? And that's something for you to examine on your own. What is your current paradigm about leadership? How do you perceive leadership? Is something that you would have to evaluate on an individual basis, because you'd have to it's what you develop to be able to make sense of what you see happening around you. So that paradigm is something that you're going to be looking at from a perspective. So what happens though when there's shifting paradigms? A shifting paradigm becomes necessary when we see a problem occurring that that comes up, that we need to make an adjustment. That's called a paradigm shift. So paradigm shifting means that whatever we were doing in the past can't hold anymore because the current situation doesn't allow for it. So for example, teaching online is a paradigm shift. Coming to class online is also a paradigm shift, because we've ended up in a situation where we have very little control over the circumstances that are taking place. We're trying to make sure that we survive. So now we have this situation where we have to go into the online environment. But it's interesting that whereas we've made the shift over now, 3 years now, coming up on 3 years, the this process has been available from a long time now. But why did the school was so slow to make the shift, that to move programs fully online? Because I remember for years we've been trying to move our degree programs fully online, but there was a lot of barriers to it, because people felt that the face-to-face experience was the most rich method of dealing with this. But I mean, I have done courses online and from different institutions and different forms of study, and it has been quite effective if I follow the instructions of the program design. Um, there are problems that come up, but you understand what I'm saying. This is an example of a paradigm shift, is that shift away from face-to-face classes into the online classes. And I know a lot of you all had problems with the shift. So I mean, given you an opportunity here to talk about how you all feel about that online shift that we talked about, that we've gone through. How do you all feel about that? Well,
Well, so from my perspective, in some ways, it is more comfortable and convenient.
right. So there's the comfort and convenience element.
Yeah, I'd rather fight up with traffic and get up and hustle to go no point A to point B.
Mm-hmm.
I just home.
What might be a downside to you for that?
The downside is, well, like what taking place here now, the interaction of the class. The majority of students kind of shy.
Well,
Or if
you're
it was
shy.
in the open forum, they couldn't hide.
Well, I mean, yes, you get the situation of people because I mean, literally, I'm looking at all these icons on my screen here, and I really don't know if there's a student behind the icon or people just have the computer on and the computer's watching us do the course and interact with material. And that is true. That is one drawback, which is why in the secondary and primary school systems, they insist that the students turn on the camera because the teachers want to see if you're actually physically there. I mean, I'm not going to do that because I don't know what circumstance you have that
No, well, my presently the project management lecturer was Tosca. What's her name?
Francis Tosca.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she insists that we put on the camera.
Yeah, I mean,
Yes,
that's fine. I mean, she could ask for that, but I will tell you that the instructions from the college is we can't insist that everybody turns on the camera because we don't know what their personal circumstances are in relation to that. How do you all feel about that? I mean, and other people, please, if you're there, please weigh in on the situation or the question that I'm asking in terms of how you feel about the online environment and the switchover that we made. Do you agree with it? Are you okay with it? Are there problems that you're having? That type of stuff.
I'm definitely okay with it because parking was a big issue to get to classes.
I used to hear that story all the time.
Yeah. So it's like me as a female parking 3 streets away, and I have a 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. class to walk back to the car, which is kind of uncomfortable.
Well, we've had, and we did have a lot of attacks take place with
Yeah.
students. People lost their
So
car, all kind of stuff. It used to be a lot of.
now it's comfortable. You don't have to like get up and put in the effort to get ready, go there, find parking, reach there half an hour early just for that. It was a little tough in the beginning because I didn't have a desk set up, so the disassociation from like sitting in my room and doing work and feeling a little lazy to now having a proper setup feels a little more like class. But I miss in-person class.
I do too. I mean, the social interactions. So I try to encourage people to speak in class, and if you want, you could turn on your camera if you so desire. And by example, I'll turn my camera on and whatnot. And I like the way that built into to this format, there's these backgrounds you could turn on. So as long as you kind of put yourself against a wall or put a wall behind you, you can project these little interesting things behind you, and it kind of helps with the circumstance. I mean, have some fishies swimming around you kind of situation like that. But one of the problems I faced with moving online, and it's still a challenge for me, is actually finding work-life balance. Because I mean, literally, my bed is right behind me. I roll off my bed. I'm at work.
Exactly.
So Donald is correct. I mean, the travel time is no longer. In fact, I have to remember to go and start my vehicle because it'll stay for weeks without starting, and the battery will run down. I've had situations having to change the battery because I just simply haven't been starting the vehicle and running it. I remember eventually I started to drive it one day, and the transmission, the oil and transmission had gotten so gummed up that the transmission wasn't rolling properly. So that was a pain, but I had to get that sorted.
Mr. Bisu, I thought I alone wasn't that problem.
No, I mean, I have to literally schedule one day a week, go downstairs and start the van for half an hour.
I literally like once or twice a week or once at least I try to go my Arrow Valencia and come back.
Yeah, I live in Valencia, so I mean, and I'm losing interest in taking long drives and stuff like that too. That's another thing. But I would at some point, but the way my schedule is, right, I'm teaching every night, including Saturdays. So there's very little time for me to do anything during the day. So I have one day, I have Friday off and Sunday off. So you'll find on Fridays and Sundays, I'm not going to respond to anybody because I just want some downtime. Because literally, I get up in the morning and turn on my PC. Sometimes my PC stays on all night. I'm on at late hours of the night. Some of the problem online when people don't have certain resources like a good. Okay, there's a comment that somebody has made. Don't have certain resources like a good computer or have. Yes, that's true. That's a problem as well because some people are hooking onto classes with phones and tablets and stuff like that, and it doesn't lend itself to really being able to engage in the classroom and to maximize their thing. So yes, oh, by the way, you're familiar. You also saw that the college is lending yes, lending computers now. That what happened is I'll let you know what took place to bring that up. You all know that we shut down a few of our campuses, right? We shut down Sandy Grande, El Dorado, right? And as a result, each one of those places means that we had computers galore all over the place, hard drives and everything. So what they thought was, okay, we take those computers, kind of revamp them and that kind of stuff, and then now we can lend an entire unit to a student for the semester to be able to use at their home. And you'll get the software that we pay for, that we have all the stuff. So you'll get the Microsoft suite that is licensed to the college and whatnot, so that you can, so if you do have a challenge with having a PC at home, I would tell you, contact the college and see. I think they put out some emails in relation to it. And I was quite happy when I saw that because it's a lot of resources just sitting there, and you don't necessarily need a high-end PC, that kind of stuff. The only thing that you might need to do is to add a camera to it, or if they haven't already included a camera. And most of the PCs now came with flat screens, not the big deep screens. So hopefully they would have that. But I would recommend that you guys try looking at that a bit. Check it out. You never know. All right, and that's true. That's one of the challenges as well. But I know for me, I spent a lot of money purchasing my own equipment to be able to teach from online, because I was using a laptop, and then it was, the laptop has very huge limitations in terms of that stuff. I had to upgrade my my bedroom as well to make sure that it could handle it, and the Wi-Fi connection in the house. So I did, lay out a fair amount of money for it. But again, it's my job, so I felt, and the school wasn't paying for these things, so I just decided to go ahead and do it. Because I felt, okay, I want to feel comfortable, invest in a desk, a proper chair, that kind of stuff. Else, because my back started to kill me after a while from sitting with different chairs and stuff, so it was problematic. But again, how do you all feel about the transition? I mean, I know some courses like MLT, you also have a few practical, not few, you all have practical classes, because MedLab Tech, nursing program, I think there's the not pharmacy, but there are a couple of courses that require some practicals. So you still have to get out there. Graphic arts, I think you all have some practical elements as well, for those people who are outside there. So hopefully you all are. So yeah, I'm giving up on the chance of you all talking about this, because like nobody understands. We'll see how it goes. Let's continue with the presentation. So the current example that the book wants us to look at is a paradigm shift from looking at leadership as not something about the leader as it is more about the followers. So leadership is not something a leader possesses so much as a process involving followership. And followership is really leadership in action among people in the group. So this is important because when we think about leadership, we think about the leader all the time. But one of the things that we have to pay attention to is that leaders can't do anything without the support of followership. And that's an important element that we have to remember. leaders can't do anything if there's nobody to do things with them, and that's a critical element. So follower types. Let's look at this. And I'd like you all to relate this to your behavior in groups. So on the x-axis, we have the performance initiative from low to high. That's the ability of the individual to work, especially if they're working on their own initiative. And on the y-axis, we're looking at the relationship initiative. That is the development of relations and networking and that type of stuff, from a low position of low activity or initiative to a high initiative. So if we look at the individual in the corner here, the upper right quadrant here, this is the partner. Partners are people who have high relationship initiative coefficients with low and high performance. And that means they can work well with other people, have high levels of initiative towards the development of that partnership and development of the performance action, doing things. So this person here is the kind of individual you kind of would like to have in a group, because they're working hand in hand with the leader or the leadership in the organization or in a group. Problems with partners, though, is that partners can quickly begin to challenge leadership, and therefore sometimes a lot of leaders don't like the development of partners. As opposed to the partner, you have a subordinate, somebody who really doesn't have a lot of initiative when it comes to developing the network, nor are they keen on doing anything, and therefore they are subordinates. They require a lot of heavy supervision and guidance to get things done. We have group members like that. We kind of call them, you all have names for them, let me put it that way. Then you have the contributor. Let's go on the other extreme now. They have very low relationship initiative but very high performance. So these are guys who they don't like the meetings and the networking element, but they're real good at getting work done. That's a contributor. There's an important place for somebody like that. And then, of course, you have the opposite to him, the politician, the person who understands the meetings, likes the social elements, likes the networking, but they have very poor performance initiative. So, a lot of talk, but no performance. Whereas on the other side of that, a lot of activity, but very little communication. So a good leader would understand that followers fall into these types of categories, and therefore they need to be able to partner people together to be able to get certain things done. So for example, you would tend to partner subordinates with partners. Why? Because the partner doesn't need a lot for you to do to get them to focus on, and they can help direct the subordinates in terms of moving them. So the subordinates become like the foot soldiers who the partners that will direct and get organized. Politicians and contributors actually complement each other. So the contributor does the work, but the politician does the whole networking element that moves out and starts to develop relationship and translates the performance or the information that is developed by the contributor, and therefore is then communicated via the politician. So everybody has a role. It's up to the leader to be able to identify the roles and assign tasks according to the skills that they're showing. A lot of group activities suffer from this type of thing here. All right. Now there's another model here. This is the 7 model of followership. So you have loyalists and opportunists. So I'm kind of looking at from here to here. They're sort of opposite to each other. Realists and critics, sycophants and spectators, and then traitors and critics as well. So you have these 7 different types of things. And again, so this is a more developed model where leaders can not leaders, but followers can fall into different capacities or different activities. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody falls squarely into one of these groups. It means that some people can straddle different groups or have different types of traits. But these are the traits that this particular person kind of developed. And of course, they spoke about what their functions are and how you can utilize them as a leader to be able to get things done, and knowing how much you can get things done, and deal with situations there. All right. So, what are the responsibilities of followers in the model that we're looking at? First, offer support to the leader. That's a given. Most leaders, anybody, you run an organization, you run a group, you kind of want to get the support of your followers to be able to get things done. And in order to get things done, you have to support your leader. Take initiative, which means you can't expect the leader to be identifying everything that needs to be done. Good followers will be able to see that something needs to be done and take initiative before being even asked or it being seen that it has to get done. Playing counselor and coaching roles, and this is to both the leader and other followers. So a good follower will provide those types of roles or coaching roles and counseling roles to other members of the organization. The leader as well, counseling will be listening and even maybe coaching a leader on skills that they may be lacking or things they need help with. Raise issues and concerns where necessary. And this is one that a lot of leaders don't like because it may involve a problem that they're having with the leader and their behavior or some things that they may be doing or not doing. Seek and encourage honest feedback. That's something that good followers would do because you really want to know, is this working properly? Should I be doing something else? In encouraging that kind of honest feedback makes for better quality of decision making. Clarifying your rules and expectation, that's important. Because if you don't know what exactly you're doing and what is expected of you, then you're going to be just kind of, grasping at straws as to what you're doing. Showing appreciation, both to the leader and other followers, that's important. A job well done and telling somebody about it helps because it will help to reinforce positive behavior. So here we're looking at behavior modification by showing through a reward system that will tend to help. Keeping the leader informed, that's actually something that is critical. Whatever's happening within the organization or the group, it's important that whoever's in the leadership position stays in touch with what's going on there. And the last one, resist inappropriate influences of the leader. And that's one that is difficult to do because some leaders may might kick back at that because they don't want other people. If you think about charismatic leaders, which we will look at in the past, in other parts of the course, charismatic leaders of a negative or like leaders who actually ended up doing really, really bad things were simply they resisted any sort of influence from their followership because what they wanted from their followership was absolute what's the word I want to use? They wanted absolute dedication and no questions asked. So in essence, they just kind of wanted sheep. In order to fulfill those particular responsibilities, these are the competencies that a follower must have. They must display loyalty. They must function well in change-oriented environments. They must function well on teams. They must be able to think independently and critically. And they must consider integrity of high importance, of paramount importance. Those are the competencies required by followers. So the question is followers the best way to describe these types of people? What would be your suggestion to that? What might be a better word to use instead of calling them followers? What might be a term that you might like to use? Anybody? Nobody? What about associates? This is another model here that looks at follower behavior. So the axes are looking at critical thinking, independent and critical thinking. Either you're high in that area or you're very low on dependent and not thinking critically. This has to do with your level of activity, whether or not you're passive or active. So you'd see the sheep here. These are passive people. They don't do anything until told to do so, and they don't think critically, and they're highly dependent upon decision making of the leadership. That's sheep. yes people. They will do everything you tell them, but they don't think about what they're doing. They're just dependent on only on what the leader says. That's the yes man. You have effective followers. They're quite active, but they are critical and independent thinkers. So you can't just ask them to do whatever you want. They will question you. That's an effective follower because they will challenge leaders who are asking you to do things that are of questionable nature. And then, of course, you have of alienated followers. They are critical thinking, highly independent, but they are pulling back on their action levels in organize. And this is something that happens a lot with what we call dissatisfied employees because they are critical thinkers. They were probably effective followers before, but because of how things are going in an organization, you find that they start to move into alienated. I find this is a lot of people in Trinidad and Tobago when it comes to politics. They're alienated followers in that um, they're critical thinkers. They have the possibility of being very active, but because of the level of disappointment they may have felt about circumstances and situations that went in the past, they're no longer willing to commit their activities to anything that's going on and becoming it. I find myself sometimes thinking along those lines as well that I feel almost powerless to be able to do anything about the circumstances that happen around us because I feel as if I can think about what's going on, I can see the negative, the positive, and I make a value judgment across there. But my ability to do anything about it is severely limited in terms of it. Or at least that's the way I feel about it. All right. So as opposed to the follower, now we need to look at the leadership. And the leadership styles that we talked about that are available for use by any leader would fall into these 6 styles. So the classical theories will give you the laissez-faire approach, so that's management by just how it goes, whatever happens, things will sort itself out. Autocratic, which is you do what I say or else get out of here. Participative would be the type of leader that encourages communication between and among members of the organization to be able to come to higher level organization. Difficult type of system to utilize. Situational leadership style will be leadership that emerges based upon the situation. So that person will become a leader and then for that situation and then fall back into the situation because sometimes situational leadership is based upon particular skills or capacities that exist only in that period of time. Emergent is where within organizations particularly leaders emerge through the rank and file and emerge in organizations as potential leaders. Then you have transactional type of leaders. Those are leaders. We tend to behave like this a lot. Leadership that is based upon the concept of making deals. So if you do X, you'll get Y. So there are transactions that go on. So as long as you do my work, you get paid. That kind of stuff, not transactional. Transformational leaders are much different. They require the ability to be able to take people into things they don't necessarily want to do. So transformation has a lot to do with change management, and that type of leadership style requires a host of different skills that can bring them in, that can help bring people not kicking and screaming, but willingly across from one system into another. And it requires a lot of motivational techniques to be able to bring people along. A visionary would be that type of leader who is able to present compelling visions of the future and inspire people to want to move towards that vision. And that's a different technique that is utilized. Not a lot of people are very good at that. But the problem with visionary, people who just only use visionary approaches, is that they can't really, they have problems with situations and with day-to-day management of business because that keeps them kind of trapped. They already focus on big picture. They're not focused on the nitty-gritty of getting things done. So those are the styles. And basically what the theory says is that regardless of the circumstances you come across, leadership needs to be able, or individuals that fall into leadership need to be able to borrow from any one of these different styles to be able to utilize them in the process of developing leadership. So that's the critical nature of this. And we'll get into more details about this in the other chapters. So the leader is defined as the person who is the one who's engaging with other individuals to get that change done. So that is reminiscent of the definition of what leadership is about. This one speaks to the individual who's actively engaged with others to get that change done. Um, Purpose of leaders. Leaders are required to motivate employees, attain organizational goals, ensure rules are met, and we follow the rules, provide continuity and momentum. That's an important element. Embrace and foster change, because if your leadership doesn't embrace change and foster change, then what's for the rest of us? Act in accordance with the common good, so they do things for the best of the majority. Behave in a social responsible manner. Promote civic engagement and civic responsibility. We'll start to look at those. What is social responsibility? That is your personal commitment to the well-being of people, the world around us, and the public, the general good of the thing. Social responsibility. That's your own personal. So as a leader, you have to exhibit a high level of social responsibility because you are in charge and responsible for organizations or groups that encompass a lot of people besides yourself who come from different types of communities and, as I said, a shared world. And you're doing things for the public good. So you're thinking well beyond your own little organization, but how your organization interacts with the larger world around it. So that's being socially responsible. Civic engagement is your sense of responsibility for the community that you operate in, and that is not just the work community, but your social community, your family, and the wider community that you're actually physically located in. So you have to be responsible. And I think some of the things that we're talking about here is participating in different types of activities, um, willing to contribute time, especially that's probably the time and money towards the achievement of civic goals, getting involved in civic activity like politics or representation of people. Social cohesion, meaning that you're looking at developing trust with others and making sure that that trust is reciprocal in nature, so that what you trust them, they trust you, that kind of stuff, and it's kind of give and take. A film that actually kind of mirrored some of this images, something called Pay It Forward. If you ever find that film, you could look at it. Civic responsibility is your sense of personal responsibility that you feel towards holding up the obligations of any part of the community. So that actually speaks to things like, following the rules and the regulations that govern us. So like jury duty, going to school, obeying the law, something like that. I mean, paying taxes, nobody wants to pay that. All right, those are the things that actions required by law, actions that citizens should take. Getting about community service, you should vote, you should want to serve in the military. But this is not we don't have this element too much, but displaying patriotism, and not just haphazardly when we win a football game or something like that, but being patriotic to the country generally. We have a very poor sense of patriotism in this country, I find generally. And it happens ever so often when something good happens, but when something bad goes on, it's sort of like, it's almost like we change our citizenship when something goes wrong. All right. Should a leader know everything? This is a good question. And I asked this before of, I think it was, who was it? Should the leader know everything? And he answered quite correctly, no. That actually is, and some leaders actually are intimidated by that. They believe they should know everything. But to be really honest with you, in this world, you can't know everything. And this is impossible to think about it. And it's an impossible circumstance where you expect a leader to know everything. What a leader needs to do, though, is they need to be open to learning, and that is really the most important element. Because if the leadership of an organization is open to understanding that learning is and learning together is going to be critical to our own development, that is going to be the most important thing. So the whole group, including leader, needs to make sure that the environment is open to learning, making mistakes, and sharing knowledge, and that is a critical element here. So not only are we going to be open to the prospect of learning together, but also the probability, and not the probability, the certainty of making mistakes and not being, you know, criticized and raked over the coals for making a mistake. That is something that a lot of organizations do. That you make a mistake and then that's it, you're dead. And another element is sharing knowledge. A lot of individuals believe that keeping knowledge to themselves gives them power. It's kind of very old school methodology or Machiavellian approach to leadership techniques, that you only release the knowledge that you think is necessary for others to know. So it's a very kind of surreptitious type of behavior that in politics tends to come up a lot. That you only need to know what I need you to know, and nothing more beyond that. So that's kind of the nature of leadership that exists around us. And that concept of sharing knowledge is a very important element. So this is the learning model that we talked about. You guys can go through this one on your own. So it speaks to your focus, your will, your capacity, and the intersection of all three gets to the point of what you do. But as you can see, the intersection of focus and capacity is what you can do. Focus and will is what you want to do. Capability and will is what you could do, but you require focus, will, and capacity or capability to be able to do things. That's the nature of how it works in terms of the learning model. This is a different model that talks to utilizing experience as one of the methods, experience, reflection, and critical inquiry to be able to develop better performance as part of learning. And this makes sense. I mean, this is kind of like every day. When you actually do something and you think about it and you reflect upon how it was done and so on, then you can make improvements, and it's a never-ending process. This is what we speak about in terms of continuous learning or lifelong learners. I know we speak of that in COSTAT as one of our mission statement activities, which is lifelong learners. So that's something that this model actually speaks to that. The most effective organizations in the world are actually learning environments, and therefore learning is always going to be ongoing, and that's why we always speak to lifelong learners, which again I must safely say that COSTAT is that way, because we did go into a lot of training to make the transition out into the online services, and although we've arrived at some level, it doesn't mean we're finished. We keep on learning. This one thing I've found that as when I was growing up, I always wanted to stop being a student because I didn't want to have homework. And then I became a teacher and realized that never have homework. It's always gonna have things to be doing all the time. All right, so we talked about experiential learning, and that is how we come to information through the experience of doing things, and moving it from an abstract concept into actually doing it. So it's sort of like, reading about doing something. I think there's a model here that actually tells it. Here it is. You actually do something, reflect upon it, think about it, and then actively experiment, and that experience then affects that whole cycle. So this is experiential learning, and it actually doesn't just go in a circle. It kind of spirals outwards, because every time you do it, you get better and you spiral outwards and you improve. The actual thing about it, if you want to become proficient at doing anything in life, you have to spend roughly about 10,000 hours doing it. So you can kind of work that down to days and months and years and whatnot, and you'll start to understand that that's one of the reasons why people get better at doing certain things over time, is because of the benefit of experiential learning and that openness to the process. Now, if you take out reflection and observation, then the process becomes mute, right? So, because if you just try to go from experience to active experimentation, or leave out any one of these steps, you're going to actually short circuit the thing, and you won't spiral outwards, you might spiral inwards, because you'll keep on making the same mistakes over and over again, and you expect things to get different, but you're not doing what is necessary to make it better. All right, so I want to start closing this element. And leadership is a role that is open to anybody, and it's from the text itself. Leadership is a role open to anyone. Leadership is living by a personal set of rules in which you motivate others to do the right things, be engaged in the world, and to listen to others and their concerns. Leadership is focused on the other person. And that's something that I found in this particular quote from this student who wrote in the text, or was quoted in the text, was important. The last part here. Leadership is focused on the other person. And we tend to have the reverse opinion about leadership. Leadership is about the leader. No, it's not. Leadership is about the other people in the process. And that's where I think we could call it wraps for tonight. There are a couple of other slides that just basically give some sort of ideas about leadership. There's some citation here as well. And this last image here that I'd like to leave you with. Leadership is not the privilege of the few, but you and I can be and should be leaders. So this guy at the front here is not the leader, but they're all leaders. I'd hate to be that penguin there. That looks really cool. All right, guys, any questions on what we're looking at so far?
Not really, no.
All right, guys.
Not yet, sir.
Not yet? All right. So let's call it Jorge for the evening. Oh, I should. So I'll stop the recording now. And that way we can. So nobody has any questions they want to ask, right? So we good there?